and welcome from my little space here in Vienna. My name is Louise, and I know it is already February, but I still wanted to talk about some books that I enjoyed in 2023 because I am quite a slow reader, but I think last year was a good book year, and there are just some books that I really like to talk about. And it's hard for me to find time to read private books because I'm still studying and all my studies have something to do with literature. I started off with comparative literature, made my bachelor. Then I also, and I'm still doing that, my bachelor in Scandinavian studies, which also has a lot to do with Scandinavian literature. And now I started my master in Austrian studies, which is all about Austrian literature, linguistics, culture, history, but with a focus on Austria. But yeah, there is a big part is about literature, and obviously I have to do a lot of reading, which I love, but at the same time it can be challenging sometimes when I don't find any time for the private books that I would like to read. But like I said, last year was a good book year, and without further ado, let's talk about them. So the first book I would like to talk about is Haruki Murakami's Norwegian Wood. So this is the German version. The title is quite different in German. It's called Naokos Lächeln, and translated that's basically Naoko's Smile. So it's very different. But it was the first book that I ever read by Haruki Murakami, and I'm really happy that I finally got into one of his books. But I honestly don't really know what to say. Like, I can't say I loved it, but I would never say that I didn't like it. So I'm a little bit unsure, to be honest. The book is focusing on relationships between the main character, and there is a woman and then there is another woman. So it's a love story, but it is very complex and very intense as well. I knew that Murakami wrote quite intense and also, difficult scenes. Sometimes it was a little bit hard for me to read them, because just of the because of the topics. There is a lot of death in the book, and yeah, you're confronted with a lot of very heavy topics. And I absolutely loved the writing style. I was totally in the story. I loved reading his sentences and words, and that was absolutely beautiful. So it didn't take me very long to read this book, actually, because I loved the style so much. But the story itself was a little bit difficult for me. I had problems with the character's perspective sometimes, or at least to understand the actions of the main character. The name is Toru. So Toru's actions were sometimes not 100% clear to me, or his thoughts. I felt, even though it was from his perspective, I still felt kind of far away from him. I would really love to know if anyone else experienced that too. And the interesting thing is that with Japanese literature, I've had this experience quite a few times, that I felt like it's so beautifully written and the characters are so interesting, but I just kind of feel there is this distance. And yeah, I don't know, maybe you've had similar experiences or any thoughts on this. I would love to hear that. I've had this with this book as well, and I think one of the biggest issues for me was a few very intense scenes. Maybe for anyone who's read the book, I don't want to spoil anything, but there is a scene with this woman and a very very young girl, and some sexual situation. It's kind of hard to explain, but that was so intense to read that I actually wanted to put the book away for a while. That's just a very personal thing for me. So it was a little bit hard to read certain parts of the book, but I think I definitely want to read something else by Murakami. And if I had to rate the book, I would probably give it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. Yeah. So it was a great book, but I had my problems finding or understanding the character's voice and perspective. And also, it was quite heavy. I mean, that is not a reason that I think the book was bad or anything, not at all, and also not a reason that I would rate it any less. But it was just a heavy book, and I think that's important to know before you read it. But still, quite impressive, and I definitely want to get my hands on more books from Murakami. The second book I want to talk about is a fantasy, or yeah, it's fantasy. The Atlas 6 by Olivie Blake. And it is quite a hype, I think, at the moment. I already have the second book at home, which is a little bit upsetting because the format is completely different to the first one. It is much bigger and it looks so stupid in my bookshelf. I really, really don't like it. But about this book, I love fantasy books. I really, really love this genre. It's just, yeah, one of my comfort genres, so to say. I've always enjoyed fantasy. And this book is, there are different characters, six different characters. You get 6 different perspectives. They all are chosen for this very special kind of university. Is it a university? I could just read out the blurb real quick. 6 extraordinary magicians, 5 chances to win 1 secret society. Once a decade, the world's best magicians are invited to join the elite Alexandrian society. Its members enjoy a lifetime of power and access to ancient secrets, but only 5 places are offered. So after recruitment by the mysterious Atlas Blakely, the candidates must complete a rigorous year of arcane study. Yeah, I'm not going to read further, but at the beginning, I was struggling a little bit because you get one perspective after the other and one kind of snippet after the other, but it was a little bit not repetitive, but a little bit boring at the beginning. And I read this with my book club. I have this little book club with 2 friends, and we were all a little bit like, are we really gonna keep on reading, basically? And I was like, yeah, I'm gonna try, and I did, and I'm very happy that I did, because I love the rest of the book. It took me quite a long time, and then when things got a little bit more complex, because I think the story is quite complex, there is a lot going on and a lot of like philosophical and scientific ideas happening, and I found that really interesting. And I just felt like I understood the characters a little bit better after a while, but it took me maybe not half the book, but at least quite a big portion of the first half, and then I really loved it. And I think it is worth it. It's worth to read the first few chapters to get over this a little bit kind of dull parts. And I also struggled with the characters. You have 6 perspectives, and some of them felt so similar, especially at the beginning. And it took quite a while for me to really grasp the different voices. I usually love it when you have different perspectives. I think that's really cool. But with this one, it was okay. Some characters just felt a lot more interesting to others. I mean, you always have that, but with this book particular, it was quite intense at the beginning. But then I was really into it. I have the second book lying around here, and I really hope I'll find the time to read it soon. I also know that there is a 3rd book now that came out, and one person I know talked about it briefly, and she said that she didn't like the 3rd book and was quite disappointed. Please, no spoilers, but maybe you can already drop in the comments what you thought about the series. I don't even know if there's going to be another book afterwards, but the first one was great. I loved it. It got really really interesting, thrilling at the end. I loved it. I want to know how it continues. So this is a 4 out of 5, I would say. Yeah, 4 out of 5 stars from me. Okay, the next book I want to talk about is from an Austrian author, and I was debating whether I should talk about it or not, but I actually really liked it. And there is no English translation yet, but the author, Milena Michiko Flasar, has other books that are translated into English. So I thought I'm just going to introduce you to it, and maybe there are some people who speak German. I also think that it is a book that people who learn German and who are not fluent could read it, because it's not super complex, like the writing style. In German, the title is Oben, Erde, unten, Himmel. And another book by this author is I Called Him Cravat. And that was another book I loved. And I think the author is really, really interesting and great. I've seen her at readings several times, and it was always super lovely to hear her talk about her work. And this book particularly, it has a very special plot, because it is about a young woman who looks for a job, and there is this job at a cleaning company, and she just applies and goes to the interview, and she realizes they clean places where people died, and they weren't found for a very long time. So the apartment has, special smells and liquids from the dead person, and they have to clean it. And it is set in Japan, because the author has I don't know if her mother or her father is from Japan, I'm not entirely sure. It is it's like a very heavy topic, actually, and the book talks about death quite a lot, but it still has a very subtle way of doing so. And it is still, I did think it was quite sad and also emotional, but it wasn't super dark or like left me completely depressed afterwards. It was very beautiful. And then there is this German word, but I can't think of the translation. Versöhnlich, I don't know. And I loved how the characters were pictured, and I think the author has just a very, very unique style of writing. But if I had to rate it, I would say 4 out of 5, maybe. Yeah. I think some of her other books were maybe a little bit stronger, but it's still a beautiful book. I highly recommend it for anyone who speaks German, or maybe they will translate it after some time. And if you are interested in this author, she's Austrian, so that's pretty cool. You can still get some of her other books that are already translated. Okay, the next book is by Walter Moers. He's a German fantasy author and also translated into English. This is the German version, but the English title is The Labyrinth of Dreaming Books. This is the second book in a series, and the first one is called The City of Dreaming Books, I believe. Yes, The City of Dreaming Books. And it has some great illustrations in there, so that is also really lovely. I must say the first book was absolutely amazing. I loved it. It was so intense and driven by so many exciting happenings and things. So there was a lot happening. I also read this book with the first book with my little book club, and my friends didn't really enjoy it because it's a little bit over the top. It has a very interesting writing style. So the main character talks to the audience, and it's about, like, in the book there are a lot of creatures, and it's not about humans. it's about those creatures and this the main character, who has a different name in English than in German, but I don't remember. So the main character is a writer, and then he decides to go to this big city where everything is about books, and you can buy books everywhere, and there is this big underworld underneath the city where you can find some very old and expensive books. And yeah, it's super exciting, and there is a lot happening. For me, it was really great. I loved how, yeah, how you kind of, you get into the city and you only see, or you get to know the surface, and then you dive deep, and there is so much happening. It is wild. I love that. My friends didn't so much. But then with the second book, it was kind of the opposite, that almost nothing happened, or that was how I felt about it. And especially after the first book was so intense with a lot of action. The second book is like the main character goes back into that, like he's in a different place, and then he comes back to that city, and the ending is basically is an open ending, and kind of gives you a hint that something big is going to happen. But the book is, for me, it was a false promise, because I thought this big thing that opens up at the end already happens during that book. But it's kind of the path, and then it ends with this major event. I don't want to give out any spoilers, but I don't know, you might have to have a very long breath for this one. It feels like this in between story, and then it will continue with a lot of exciting things to come. But I was a little bit disappointed in that one, and I would rate it with, I don't know, 2.5 is maybe a little bit harsh, because I still love the writing style, but 3 kind of feels a little bit much. Let's go with 3 out of 5 points. Yeah. This one is the last I would like to talk about. It's Anne of Green Gables. There is a beautiful series, and this is the book that it is based on. It is by Lucy M. Montgomery, and I found this beautiful edition in a bookstore. It's very lovely. The book talks about an orphan who comes to a family who actually wanted a boy, and they want to send her back because she's a girl, and they didn't want a girl because they need help on their farm. And Anne is a very special character. She has a very interesting way of expressing herself. She's a little bit intense for some people. She's super excited about everything. She has a very unique style of speaking, and she lives in her own fantasy world, and it's quite interesting. I already saw the series, and then I thought, let's read the book, and I would say that was a mistake. So for anyone, or at least that would be my recommendation for anyone who's thinking of reading or watching the series first, read the book first and then watch the series. I think there are more books than just this one, but I only read this one, and I honestly am not 100% sure. So I would definitely recommend to read the book first and then watch the series, because I just had this whole thing in my head of all the exciting things happening, and the book just has a very different tone. It is still beautifully written, and it was published in, I think, around 1900, so that's quite cool. And yeah, I think it is a lovely book, a very wholesome story, a few very sad things happening, but also lovely and exciting. The character Anne is just so cool. But to be honest, it took me a while to get into the series. I started the series, then I stopped it because I was like, I really can't take that character. It is too much. And then a lot of friends were like, you should watch it. I think you would really like it. And I was like, okay, let's give it another try. And then I loved it. It just took a while for me. So yeah, I would give it 3.5 out of 5 stars. So yeah, those were just a few of the books that I read last year and that I really enjoyed. I would love to hear if you read any of those books that I just talked about. What are your thoughts? And maybe what is your favorite book that you read in 2023? If I had to pick my favorite one, I would say it's hard, but I think I would go with the Atlas 6 because it was I didn't have high hopes on that book. I really thought it would be not that great, and then I really enjoyed it. So maybe that one. All right, it is time to finish my tea, and I'll see you next week. Maybe I hope I'll get some video done. Maybe a February writing vlog or just some more book talk. We'll see. And I wish you a pleasant evening and hope you have a lovely end of February. Goodbye. And my legs are falling asleep.